What if the key to freedom isn't a promotion, a side hustle, or a minimalist lifestyle, but 40 acres of sun-baked earth where the only noise at midnight is the wind whispering across desert grasses and the distant call of a coyote under a sky so thick with stars it feels like drowning in diamonds? Scattered across Arizona's vast rural canvas lie hidden sanctuaries that defy every assumption about modern real estate. These are not cookie-cutter subdivisions or gentrified farmsteads reborn as boutique Airbnbs. They are raw, honest parcels of land, paired with structures that range from turnkey equestrian compounds to solar-powered cabins humming with self-sufficiency. From foreclosed homesteads with mountain views to geodesic domes rising like alien artifacts at the edge of civilization. For less than the cost of a used SUV, or in some cases, less than a single year's rent in a mid-size American city, you can claim ownership of space itself. Room to breathe, to build, to fail, to reinvent without judgment or oversight. Imagine waking in a dual-residence compound nestled in the Sulphur Springs Valley, where 14 fenced acres stretch toward the Chiricahua Mountains, and 2 freshly painted homes stand ready to house your family or board horses for income. The main residence offers cool comfort even in July, thanks to high-efficiency foam insulation, while a massive insulated shop with 3 roll-up doors shelters tractors, vintage trucks, or dreams yet unnamed. Nearby, the town of Wilcox moves to the rhythm of ranching and wine harvests, where rodeos remain unironic celebrations of heritage, and Railroad Avenue still carries the ghostly rumble of midnight freight trains. A reminder that you're connected enough to civilization, but distant enough to forget its demands. Property taxes barely register as a rounding error on your annual budget, yet you're minutes from Interstate 10, poised between solitude and accessibility. Travel west along the legendary ribbon of Route 66 and discover a different kind of freedom. 40 acres of high desert, where a compact pine-walled cabin runs entirely on owned solar panels and battery backup. This isn't survivalist austerity, but deliberate simplicity. A home where Netflix streams uninterrupted after sunset, where a 2,500-gallon water tank ensures security, and where Verizon service proves that off-grid doesn't mean offline. The seller's invitation is disarmingly direct. Bring your toothbrush and move in. Surrounding you, the town of Seligman exists as a living museum of Americana. Chrome diners frozen in 1955, vintage motels with flickering neon signs, and a population small enough that everyone knows your name, but respectful enough to leave you alone. 2 hours in any direction delivers you to the Grand Canyon's rims, or Prescott National Forest's silent trails. At night, the Milky Way arcs overhead with impossible clarity, a spectacle no city dweller can purchase at any price. Further south, near the whisper-quiet borderlands, a former chili processing factory stands transformed into possibility. 8 acres of fertile ground cradle a spacious 4-bedroom home, with a separate entrance, ideal for multi-generational living or rental income, while the massive block workshop, still haunted by the faint, ghostly heat of decades-old capsaicin, awaits reinvention as a mechanics bay, artisanal kitchen, or creative studio. The nearby community of Arivaca barely registers on maps, home to just over 100 souls who chose remoteness decades ago and never looked back. There are no stoplights, no chain stores, no urgency, only the slow pulse of agricultural life and the profound peace of being forgotten by the world, yet completely present in your own. In the bilingual border town of Douglas, a 5-bedroom ranch-style home sits on nearly 7 acres of fenced desert. Dual fireplaces promising warmth during rare winter evenings, while RV hookups accommodate extended family or mobile livelihoods. Mexico lies literally next door, its culture seeping across the line in the form of sizzling street food on G Avenue, and Spanish conversations drifting through open windows. This is not exoticism, but everyday reality, a fluid existence where some residents work in town, others cross daily into Agua Prieta, and everyone moves at a pace dictated by sun and season, rather than corporate calendars. Mountains frame the horizon in every direction, and property taxes cost less than most people's monthly streaming subscriptions. At the literal end of the dirt road in Yavapai County rises something unexpected. A geodesic dome home, engineered like a thermos. Its R49 insulation maintaining perfect interior temperatures, while an observation deck delivers 360-degree panoramas of antelope roaming freely across 40 acres. This is Ash Fork. Not a destination, but a decision. The entire town could fit inside a minor league baseball stadium, yet median incomes surprise outsiders who assume rural equals impoverished. Here, ranchers, remote tech workers, and artists coexist in quiet understanding. They traded convenience for clarity, noise for nuance, and the illusion of connection for the reality of solitude. Beneath the sacred granite spires of Cochise Stronghold, a place where the legendary Apache leader once evaded entire cavalry units, a foreclosure sits priced deliberately below market. 5 acres of high desert cradle a modest 3-bedroom home whose greatest feature isn't square footage, but vista. Every morning, jagged peaks catch the sunrise in a display no screen can replicate. The town bearing Cochise's name barely exists on maps, yet its silence speaks volumes. Crime statistics become irrelevant when your primary concern shifts from break-ins to respectful coexistence with rattlesnakes. This property isn't for flippers seeking quick returns. It's for visionaries who understand that some values, horizon lines, historical resonance, geological grandeur, defy appraisal. Another Wilcox property reveals how dreams sometimes outpace execution. A spacious home connected to an indoor swimming pool structure now awaiting resurrection. The bones remain. A concrete shell, plumbing infrastructure, spatial flow suggesting someone once envisioned year-round desert swimming. But the roof needs replacement and systems require renewal. Yet 11 acres of mature fruit trees border a working pistachio orchard. RV hookups stand ready, and the potential hums in the air like latent electricity. This isn't a purchase, but a partnership between buyer and possibility, demanding sweat equity, but promising lifestyle dividends no urban condo can match. High in the White Mountains foothills, the town of Snowflake earns its name honestly. Winter brings delicate snowfall that dusts rooftops and pine boughs before melting by noon, offering beauty without burden. Here, a single-story 3-bedroom home on over an acre sells for a price that would barely cover a down payment elsewhere. Stone fireplace, butcher block counters, updated flooring, nothing extravagant, everything functional. 15 miles from town center means intentional remoteness, not neglect. You trade walkable coffee shops for 4-season access, desert hiking at dawn, alpine skiing by afternoon, petrified forests within an hour's drive. Property taxes cost less than a tank of gas. It's prioritization. Return to Arivaca for an even starker proposition. A 2-story foreclosure on nearly 9 acres, where an upstairs deck delivers true panoramic views. Mountains to the east, desert basins to the west, endless sky above. Dual garages provide workshop space exceeding many urban apartments, while a secondary structure stands as blank canvas for guest quarters, studio, or micro-enterprise. At $82,000, the math recalibrates reality. Land alone in this region often exceeds $5,000 per acre. You're effectively acquiring the structure as bonus, a classic arbitrage of vision over polish. The surrounding community won't throw welcome parties, but they'll honor your autonomy. This property rewards those who see past peeling paint to potential. Solar arrays across south-facing slopes, heritage orchards in fertile pockets, or a writer's retreat where distraction becomes geographical impossibility. And finally, in the raw expanse near Yucca, the ultimate canvas awaits. 40 acres of open desert paired with a 4-bedroom cabin, priced at $55,000 after a $15,000 reduction, signaling urgent seller motivation. Honesty demands acknowledgement. The structure requires significant work. But you're not purchasing finished shelter, you're acquiring sovereignty. 40 unfragmented acres grant unparalleled freedom. Park multiple RVs without HOA fines. Build earth-sheltered structures without permitting nightmares. Install off-grid systems without bureaucratic friction. Water access depends on well depth and yield, critical factors requiring due diligence. But the sky offers infinite solar potential. Kingman lies 30 minutes away for supplies. Lake Havasu City, 40. Violent crime is virtually non-existent because population density approaches zero. This isn't for everyone. It's for the resilient, the resourceful, those who see land not as commodity, but as covenant. For $55,000, you purchase not merely property, but the right to define home on your own terms, beneath skies so vast, they recalibrate your sense of self. These Arizona properties exist at the intersection of demographic retreat, geographic marginality, and cultural reevaluation. Rural counties suffer population stagnation as youth migrate toward urban centers. Legacy landowners age without heirs interested in ranching lifestyles, and banks liquidate foreclosures rapidly to avoid carrying costs in low-demand markets. Meanwhile, remote work normalizes geographic arbitrage. Why surrender $2,000 monthly to urban density when equity, acreage, and autonomy await at a fraction of cumulative rental costs? The deeper value transcends square footage or price per acre metrics. It is psychological restoration in an age of mediation. When algorithms curate your reality, landlords dictate your living conditions, and urban density erodes privacy, land ownership becomes radical self-determination. These properties demand resilience, but reward with perspective. They require work, but deliver purpose. They isolate physically, but connect spiritually to elemental forces: sun, wind, stone, sky. They are not escapes from responsibility, but invitations to redefine it. To build not just structures but meaning. To trade curated experiences for unvarnished truth. To discover that space itself, the simple, profound luxury of room to exist without surveillance, remains the ultimate currency in a crowded world. And sometimes, just sometimes, it can still be purchased for less than you pay each year to park your car. What does it mean when the cost of owning 40 acres of land falls below the price of a single year's rent in a city where you own nothing but debt and noise? It reveals a profound disconnect between market pricing and human value. We have built economic systems that inflate the cost of proximity to jobs, to entertainment, to other people, while devaluing space, silence, and sovereignty. When land ownership becomes cheaper than temporary shelter in a concrete box, it forces us to question what we are actually paying for in urban life. Are we paying for convenience, or have we simply accepted that convenience must cost everything else? Privacy, peace, the ability to make noise without apology, the right to fail without an audience. The math exposes a hidden truth. We have been taught to see rural affordability as poverty, when it might actually represent a different form of wealth entirely. Why do we assume that isolation equals loneliness, when many people in crowded cities report feeling more alone than those living miles from their nearest neighbor? Because we confuse physical proximity with emotional connection. Cities offer constant human presence, but often without depth. Interactions with baristas, co-workers, and strangers in elevators create the illusion of community without its substance. Meanwhile, rural life demands intentionality. You cannot accidentally build relationships when your neighbor lives a mile away. You must choose connection. You show up for potlucks. You bring soup when someone is sick. You wave every time you pass on the dirt road. This scarcity of interaction makes each encounter more meaningful. The loneliness epidemic in cities stems not from lack of bodies nearby, but from lack of belonging. Distance does not create loneliness. Disconnection does. And disconnection thrives equally in apartment complexes and desert homesteads. It simply manifests differently. If you could trade your monthly rent for a property tax bill that costs less than your phone plan, what would you do with the mental space freed from financial anxiety? You would rediscover the luxury of long-term thinking. When survival consumes your present, when each paycheck vanishes into rent, utilities, and debt payments, you lose the capacity to imagine a future beyond the next billing cycle. But when housing costs shrink to a rounding error, your mind opens to possibility. You might plant fruit trees knowing you will eat their harvest in 5 years. You might learn a craft without monetizing it immediately. You might sit on your porch at dusk, not scrolling through curated lives but watching stars emerge one by one, understanding that some rewards require only patience, not payment. Financial breathing room does not guarantee happiness, but it removes the constant low-grade panic that makes everything feel temporary. It allows you to build not just structures, but meaning. What does it say about our culture that we romanticize tiny houses as minimalist triumphs, while dismissing spacious rural homes as fixer-uppers or projects? It reveals our obsession with aesthetics over autonomy. We celebrate tiny houses because they are photogenic, Instagrammable, and fit neatly into narratives about conscious consumption. But we dismiss spacious rural homes needing repair because they demand something uncomfortable. Work without immediate reward, vision without validation, patience without applause. A tiny house is a finished product. A rural homestead is an ongoing conversation between human intention and natural reality. One offers curated simplicity, the other offers raw possibility. Our bias toward the former exposes a deeper truth. We have become a culture that prefers consuming experiences to creating them. We want the appearance of self-sufficiency without its demands, the aesthetic of freedom without its responsibilities. The rural home asks you to get your hands dirty. The tiny house asks you to take a good photo. When a geodesic dome in the desert costs less than a used car, who exactly is the market failing, and who is it quietly serving? The market is failing those who equate value with location density and status signaling. It serves those who measure wealth in options rather than optics. Real estate markets price according to perceived demand, and demand flows toward convenience, schools, walkability, and social validation. Rural properties sit undervalued, not because they lack inherent worth, but because they serve needs the market cannot easily quantify. Silence, sky, self-determination. The system isn't broken. It is functioning exactly as designed, to reward proximity and punish distance. But for remote workers, artists, homesteaders, and anyone whose livelihood no longer requires physical presence in urban cores, this failure becomes opportunity. The market serves them quietly because they operate outside its primary metrics. They are not buying square footage, they are buying sovereignty. And sovereignty has no price tag the algorithms understand. If you owned land where no one could tell you what color to paint your fence, or whether you could keep chickens, would you feel more free, or more exposed by the weight of that freedom? Both, inevitably. True freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the presence of responsibility. In the city, constraints are external. HOAs, landlords, noise ordinances, social expectations. They chafe, but also comfort. They tell you who to be. On your own land, constraints become internal. Your skills, your resources, your resilience. No one stops you from building a greenhouse at 2 a.m., but no one helps you when the wind tears its plastic skin at 3 a.m. either. This exposure is the price of autonomy. Many discover they preferred the gentle tyranny of rules to the exhausting weight of unlimited choice. Others find that beneath the anxiety lies something vital, the quiet pride of solving your own problems, of building something that exists only because you willed it into being. Freedom does not feel like relief at first. It feels like vertigo. Only later, when you look back at what you created without permission, does it feel like flight. What if the real luxury of our time is not a view of the city skyline, but a view uninterrupted by human construction? A horizon that reminds you daily that you are small, temporary, and yet somehow still significant. Then we have been selling ourselves a counterfeit version of luxury for generations. We have been taught that luxury means marble countertops, concierge services, and proximity to power. But these are luxuries of ego, designed to make us feel important. The horizon offers a different luxury, perspective. It does not flatter you, it humbles you, and in that humility lies peace. When you stand on 40 acres at dusk and watch the sky shift from gold to violet to star-dusted black, you are not thinking about your inbox or your insecurities. That presence, the ability to exist without performing, is the rarest commodity in a world that monetizes attention. Cities sell the illusion of importance. The desert offers the reality of insignificance. And strangely, insignificance can be the greatest relief. You stop carrying the weight of being the center of your own universe, because the universe itself shows up to remind you it has other concerns. In that release, you find something closer to freedom than any gated community could ever provide. What becomes of community when the nearest neighbor is a mile away, and connection requires intention rather than algorithmic suggestion? Community transforms from passive consumption into active cultivation. In cities, we mistake proximity for belonging. We share walls with people whose names we never learn, nod at faces in elevators without curiosity, scroll through digital feeds of acquaintances we will never touch. This is not community. It is coexistence with convenient illusions of connection. In rural spaces, community cannot be accidental. If you want conversation, you must drive to town. If your well fails, you must call someone and hope they answer. If a storm knocks out power, you rely on neighbors who know your truck's silhouette in the dust. These constraints forge a different social contract, one based not on convenience, but on mutual dependence. People show up with tools when your fence collapses. They bring casseroles when illness strikes. They remember your dog's name. This is not nostalgia. It is necessity refined into care. The digital age promised infinite connection, but delivered isolation in crowded rooms. Rural life offers limited connection, but demands its authenticity. And sometimes, 10 genuine relationships outweigh 10,000 followers. Why do we fear the work required to restore a weathered farmhouse, when that same work might restore something weathered within ourselves? Because modern life has taught us to outsource transformation. We hire trainers to reshape our bodies, therapists to reframe our minds, contractors to renovate our homes, always seeking the finished product without enduring the process. Restoration demands something uncomfortable: the humility to begin poorly, the patience to repeat tasks until they improve, the acceptance that some damage cannot be erased but only integrated into a new story. When you sand decades of paint from a windowsill, you are not just revealing wood grain, you are practicing the art of uncovering what lies beneath surface damage. When you patch a roof under a desert sun, you learn that shelter is not granted, but maintained through daily attention. The farmhouse does not hide its history. It bears cracks, stains, scars from monsoons and neglect. And in learning to honor rather than erase those marks, you might discover permission to do the same for your own. The work is not about creating perfection. It is about participating in continuity, becoming the next hand in a chain of caretakers who understood that some things gain value not despite their age, but because of it. If the desert offers nothing but space and sky, what exactly are we afraid of finding when we sit with that emptiness long enough? ourselves, unmediated. The desert does not entertain. It does not distract. It offers no museums, no restaurants, no curated experiences to fill the void between waking and sleeping. This absence terrifies those accustomed to constant stimulation because it forces confrontation with the internal landscape we spend lifetimes avoiding. Who are you when no one is watching? What thoughts arise when there is nothing to consume? The desert mirrors back whatever you carry: restlessness, grief, creativity, peace, and refuses to apologize for its honesty. Many flee not because the desert is harsh, but because its clarity is unbearable. Cities provide endless escape routes from self-reflection. Another show to binge, another purchase to make, another social obligation to fulfill. The desert provides only wind, stone, and the slow arc of sun across sky. In that simplicity, you cannot hide from the questions you've postponed. What do I truly need? What have I been running from? What would I build if no one would ever see it? It simply creates the silence necessary to hear your own response. What does it say about our relationship with nature that we pay premium prices to visit national parks for 3 days, yet cannot imagine living beside wilderness permanently? It reveals our preference for nature as spectacle rather than companion. We want the Grand Canyon as a backdrop for photographs, not as the daily reality that demands respect for flash floods and summer heat. We want wildlife as fleeting encounters on guided tours, not as the coyote that raids your chicken coop at 2 a.m. or the rattlesnake coiled beside your woodpile. Tourism allows us to extract beauty without accepting responsibility. We leave our trash in designated bins and return to climate-controlled rooms, never facing the consequences of our presence. Living beside wilderness requires reciprocity. You take shade from the mesquite trees, but must also clear their fallen branches. You admire the javelina at dusk, but secure your compost to avoid conflict. You celebrate monsoon rains that green the desert, but repair the arroyo erosion they leave behind. This is not hardship, it is relationship. And relationship demands more than admiration. It requires adaptation. We pay to visit wilderness because we want its aesthetic without its demands. But those who stay learn that the desert does not exist for our enjoyment. It simply exists. And in accepting that truth, we shed the arrogance of being the center of the ecosystem and rediscover our place within it, not as masters, but as participants. When a property's value lies not in its finishes, but in its potential, what does that teach us about how we value ourselves? That we have been conditioned to confuse polish with worth. Society rewards the finished product, the curated Instagram feed, the debt-financed renovation, the career milestone achieved on schedule. We learn to present ourselves as complete, hiding the scaffolding of growth, the mess of becoming. A raw property with cracked plaster and outdated wiring is deemed less than by conventional metrics, yet contains everything necessary for transformation. Solid foundation, good bones, orientation to sun and wind. So too with human beings. We dismiss those in transition. The career changer at 40, the grieving widow learning to cook for one, the artist working a day job while building their craft, as incomplete or failing. But what if the cracks are not flaws, but openings? What if the unfinished state is not deficiency, but invitation? The desert property does not apologize for its roughness. It simply waits for the right hands to recognize its latent form. And perhaps our deepest healing begins when we stop trying to present ourselves as renovated and start honoring ourselves as works in progress, trusting that potential is not lesser than completion, but its necessary precursor. If freedom means having no one to answer to, why does true solitude sometimes feel heavier than the lightest social obligation? Because freedom without purpose becomes weightless in the most disorienting way. Social obligations, even minor ones, provides structure. Tuesday dinners with friends, Sunday calls to parents, showing up to work at 9. These rhythms anchor us, however gently. Remove them entirely, and you face the vertigo of infinite choice. What will you do today? Anything. And tomorrow? Anything again. This sounds liberating until you realize that meaning is not found in unlimited options, but in chosen constraints. The artist needs the constraint of the canvas. The writer needs the constraint of the page. The homesteader needs the constraint of the land's demands. Water must be hauled, animals fed, fences mended. These are not burdens that diminish freedom. They are vessels that give it shape. Without them, freedom evaporates into aimlessness. Solitude does not feel heavy because it is oppressive. It feels heavy because it asks you to carry your own meaning. No one will notice if you skip a day of work on your land. No one will judge if you spend a week in bed watching the sky. And that absence of external judgment forces you to confront the harder question. What matters to you when no one is keeping score? The weight is not the solitude itself. It is the responsibility of authoring a life without audience. What if the most radical act of our time is not to optimize our lives for productivity or happiness, but simply to stay, to commit to one piece of earth through seasons of drought and abundance? Then we have misunderstood resilience entirely. We celebrate the nomad who collects passport stamps, the entrepreneur who pivots quarterly, the influencer who reinvents their brand with each algorithm update. Movement is valorized. Staying is seen as stagnation. But the desert teaches a different wisdom. The saguaro grows 1 inch in its first decade. It does not rush. It does not compare itself to faster-growing species. It simply deepens its roots while appearing motionless above ground. After 70 years, it might bloom for the first time. This is not failure. It is fidelity to its own rhythm. To stay on a piece of land through dry years when nothing grows, through monsoons that wash out your driveway, through winters when isolation presses against the windows like physical weight. This requires a courage modern life rarely demands. It means finding meaning, not in novelty, but in depth. Not in expansion, but in roots. The world will call you boring. Algorithms will ignore you. But the soil will remember your footsteps. The trees you plant will shade someone you will never meet. And in a culture obsessed with legacy as viral fame, you will have built something quieter and more enduring. Continuity. Not the legacy of being remembered, but the legacy of tending, of passing land healthier than you found it, of adding one more thread to a tapestry you did not weave, but refused to unravel. That is not stagnation. It is the deepest form of participation in time itself. What happens to ambition when the only person measuring your success is yourself and the land you tend? Ambition sheds its competitive skin and grows roots instead of wings. In cities, ambition is vertical, climbing ladders, accumulating titles, outpacing peers in visible metrics of achievement. On 40 acres with no audience, ambition turns horizontal, spreading outward into depth rather than upward into status. You measure success not by promotions, but by the health of your soil after 3 seasons of composting. Not by salary increases, but by the moment a fruit tree you planted finally bears harvest. Not by social validation, but by the quiet satisfaction of fixing a broken pump with your own hands as dusk falls. This is not diminished ambition, it is redirected. The drive to become remains, but its destination shifts from external recognition to internal coherence. You stop asking, "What will others think?" and begin asking, "Does this align with the life I am trying to grow?" The land does not applaud your efforts, but it responds honestly. Neglect yields dust, care yields growth. In this reciprocity, ambition transforms from performance into practice, a daily commitment to becoming the kind of person who leaves things better than they found them. And strangely, without anyone watching, you might finally discover what you were truly capable of all along. Why do we assume that comfort and meaning must exist in opposition, when the deepest discomfort often precedes the most profound meaning? Because modern life has engineered comfort into a default setting, making any friction feel like failure rather than invitation. We have built thermostats that maintain 72 degrees year-round, delivery apps that eliminate hunger within minutes, and noise-canceling headphones that silence the world's rough edges. This comfort is not evil. It is often mercy. But when comfort becomes the primary metric for a life well lived, we lose the capacity to endure the necessary abrasions that shape us. The calloused hands from splitting firewood contain a different wisdom than soft palms that have never known labor. The frustration of a failed garden teaches resilience no success could impart. The loneliness of a first winter alone on the land forces a confrontation with self that crowded apartments allow us to avoid indefinitely. Meaning is not found in suffering for its own sake, but in the friction between intention and reality, in the gap between the home you envisioned and the one you actually built with imperfect hands. Comfort soothes the body, discomfort forges the soul, and perhaps maturity arrives when we stop seeking a life without friction and begin discerning which discomforts are worth enduring because they lead somewhere true. If the desert teaches anything, what is the lesson it repeats most insistently beneath its silent skies? That scarcity is not punishment, but clarification. The desert withholds water, soft soil, easy growth, not to torment, but to reveal what is essential. Plants here do not waste energy on frivolous leaves. They grow deep taproots or store moisture in thick stems. Animals move with purpose, conserving energy between necessary actions. Even the light is ungenerous with illusion. Shadows fall sharp. Colors remain true. Nothing hides in haze. This is the desert's gift. It strips away the non-essential until only what matters remains. In cities, abundance obscures priorities. We drown in options, distractions, and possessions until we cannot distinguish need from want. The desert offers the opposite mercy. By limiting water, it teaches reverence for a single glass. By limiting companionship, it teaches depth in the few connections that endure. By limiting entertainment, it teaches presence with the slow drama of clouds gathering after months of drought. Scarcity does not diminish life, it concentrates it. And those who learn to listen hear the same lesson whispered through wind across sand. You do not need more. You need only to recognize what you already have and tend to it with everything you are. What becomes of identity when you are no longer defined by your job title, your zip code, or the brands you display? Identity softens from armor into atmosphere. In urban life, we wear identities like uniforms. Marketing director, Brooklyn resident, Patagonia enthusiast, each label signaling tribe membership and social coordinates. These identities protect us, but also confine us, reducing complex humans to shorthand for strangers' convenience. On land far from city rhythms, those labels lose their adhesive power. No one cares about your former title when your well needs repair. No one judges your neighborhood when your nearest neighbor is a mile away. No one notices your clothing when you spend days in dirt-stained jeans pulling weeds. Stripped of these external markers, you face the unsettling freedom of self-definition without audience. Who are you when no resume is required? You might discover facets long buried beneath professional personas. Patience you didn't know you possessed while waiting for seeds to sprout. Creativity sparked by necessity when tools break and replacements are hours away. A capacity for stillness that city life never allowed you to test. This is not loss of identity, but its expansion. From a single note played loudly to a chord played softly, complex and resonant. You become not what you do, but how you tend, how you care for land, how you welcome visitors, how you face drought without bitterness. And in that tending, You might finally meet the person you were before the world taught you to perform. When the wind is the only sound for hours, what memories rise to the surface that city noise had successfully buried? The ones that require silence to be heard. Memories do not disappear in cities. They are simply drowned out by a permanent soundtrack of traffic, notifications, and human clamor. But silence acts as an archaeologist of the soul, gently brushing away sediment until what was buried re-emerges. The smell of your grandmother's kitchen on a rainy afternoon, the weight of your father's hand on your shoulder during a moment of unspoken pride, the particular shade of green in the woods behind your childhood home where you felt safe for the first time. These memories are not dramatic. They lack the plot points we share at parties, but they contain the emotional bedrock of who we are. The desert does not excavate trauma for spectacle. It simply creates conditions where suppressed tenderness can resurface. You might find yourself crying unexpectedly while watching sunset paint the mountains, not because anything is wrong, but because the beauty mirrors a forgotten capacity for wonder you had numbed with busyness. Or you might laugh alone while repairing a fence, remembering a joke your brother told decades ago that suddenly feels urgent to recall. The wind does not judge these resurgences. It simply carries them as it carries pollen and dust, redistributing what was lost back into the present, where it can finally be integrated. This is not therapy. It is reclamation. The self you thought you had outgrown was merely waiting for quiet enough to be remembered. What if the greatest luxury available to humans is not wealth or travel, but the ability to witness a landscape across decades, to see how light falls on the same canyon wall in January at age 30, 40, 60, 80? Then we have catastrophically misallocated our resources in pursuit of novelty over depth. We chase bucket list destinations, snapping photos of places we will never see again, collecting stamps and passports while remaining strangers to the land outside our own door. But to witness a single place across time, to learn which cottonwood turns gold first each autumn, which arroyo floods after specific cloud formations, how the jackrabbit population waxes and wanes with rainfall patterns. This is a form of intimacy no vacation can replicate. It is the difference between reading a single page of a book and living inside its entire narrative arc. The canyon wall does not change dramatically year to year, yet it transforms completely across decades. Lichen spreads imperceptibly, a boulder shifts after a rare flood. The angle of your gaze changes as your body ages. You are not just observing the land, you are observing yourself through its constancy. The young person who first stood there saw possibility. The older person sees continuity. Both are true. This longitudinal witnessing teaches a patience modern life has forgotten, that some truths reveal themselves only across seasons, that meaning accumulates like sediment in slow layers, that the deepest belonging is not found in seeing everything, but in seeing one thing completely. And perhaps the ultimate privilege is not mobility, but rootedness. The quiet dignity of becoming a local, not by birth, but by duration, until the land knows your footsteps as intimately as you know its contours. Why do we fear the slowness of rural life when speed has never actually delivered the fulfillment it promised? Because speed masquerades as progress, while quietly eroding presence. We have been sold a story that faster equals better, that same-day delivery, instant communication, and rapid career advancement will finally bring the satisfaction we seek. But each acceleration merely resets the baseline for anxiety. The email answered instantly demands another. The promotion achieved brings new pressures. The vacation taken leaves behind the same self waiting at home. Speed creates the illusion of living more life when it actually compresses experience into thinner, less absorbable layers. Rural slowness is not laziness, it is absorption. When a task takes hours rather than minutes, you enter its rhythm. Hauling water from a well becomes meditation. Mending a fence becomes conversation with the land's history. Watching a storm approach across open desert becomes a lesson in atmospheric physics no screen could teach. This slowness is not empty. It is saturated. And in its saturation, you might discover that fulfillment was never waiting at the destination, but hidden in the texture of the journey itself. If only you moved slowly enough to feel it. The fear of slowness is really fear of confronting what speed has helped you avoid. The unprocessed grief, the unanswered questions, the quiet voice asking whether this is really the life you meant to build. Speed is escape, and encounter, however uncomfortable, is where transformation begins. If a house could speak after decades of witnessing human lives within its walls, what would it say about the difference between shelter and home? It would say that shelter is architecture, but home is accumulation. Shelter is the roof that keeps rain out, the walls that block wind, the floor that separates feet from earth. These are necessary, but insufficient. Home is the ghost of laughter still vibrating in the kitchen after children have grown and left. Home is the faint indentation in floorboards where a rocking chair sat for 20 years, soothing babies to sleep. Home is the window ledge worn smooth by generations of elbows resting while watching storms approach. Shelter can be bought. Home can only be grown, slowly, through repeated acts of care, through seasons of joy and sorrow, witnessed within the same four walls. A house becomes home, not through renovation, but through ritual. The same pot of coffee brewed each dawn. The same bookshelf, filled with volumes, added gradually over decades. The same patch of floor where arguments were had and reconciliations whispered. The desert farmhouse with cracked plaster and outdated wiring may offer imperfect shelter, but it holds space for home to emerge. If you stay long enough to let your life seep into its bones. And perhaps the deepest truth is this: we do not make houses into homes. We allow homes to make us, shaping our rhythms, holding our memories, becoming the silent witness to who we were, who we are, and who we might yet become. Shelter protects the body. Home holds the soul. And the difference between them is measured not in square footage, but in time.